Right. Hello, everyone. Welcome along to a very special interview. My name is Mark Wilkinson. I am a success coach, a business coach, the author of Life Remixed, and also business development director with Equilibria now. And I'm joined by two very, very special people this evening. I'll introduce them in the order I can see them on the screen. So first of all, David Senior, and then Laura Senior. I should say Senior Garcia, shouldn't I? Really, to make it absolutely spot on. David, would you like to introduce yourself to everybody?
Sure. Thank you for doing this, Mark, and really looking forward for today. My name is David Garcia. My e-colors are blue over yellow. I'm Director and Regional Operations Manager with Equilibria, also the Advanced Error Reductions in Organizations Manager, and Senior Consultant for the company for over 12, 13 years now. Also a husband, a father of two, and a key member of all my local communities.
Very nice, and of course, both of you, the children of Lewis Senior, which we'll touch on in a little while, I'm sure. David, great to have you here. Thank you for that. Laura, over to you.
Hi, Mark. Thank you very much for doing this, and good evening from Spain.
Mm-hmm.
So my name is Laura Senior Garcia. My e-colors are red over yellow. I'm a leadership advisor with Equilibria and the COO of the company. And I also am part of the board of directors, as David is as well. So a little bit about myself. I am a mom to a wonderful Valentina and happily married with my husband, Jeff. We have a very diverse family and currently living in Spain, and have been with Equilibria almost since the beginning, almost since the inception. So right about the end of 2004, so scarily coming up on 20 years.
And we're going to get into that for sure. It's going to be really interesting, at least a good hour, I'm sure we're going to spend together. Before we jump into that, I'll also say that my colours are yellow over red, and there's my wristband there. Live with intention and personal intervention. There, David's got his blue yellow there, we should explain what that is to people if they're seeing this for the very first time. I know there's lots of people that will know, e-colors. But e-colors essentially is a personality diversity tool, which shows us our strengths and our potential limiters based on our percentages and how we see the world. So the yellow for me is the socializer, is the bit of our personality that helps us engage with people. The blue is the relator, where we relate to others with lots of empathy. The red is the action part of our personality, where we get things done. And the green is where we think and analyze. And we all have different percentages within us. And it's about how we lead with the top two generally, although it can dip into other percentages, but the top two are generally why we say, yellow, red, blue, yellow, red, yellow, etc. Do you want to add anything to that about sort of a bit of background of just personality diversity, either one of you?
Well, actually, David and I have been, as you know, Mark, involved with personality diversity for a very long time. And what I would say is that for people that have been exposed to personality diversity tools before, it is a lifelong journey of learning about yourself, learning about others, learning how to manage the environment around you and manage your own reactions or responses to that environment. So even if you have been exposed to tools like this before, there's always something new you can learn. And something that can really add a perspective, that may help you out in one or more areas of your life. So I think that's just something to keep in mind there.
Absolutely, yeah. The lifelong journey and the lifelong learning piece. I never stop using my play and pause button there. I'm still learning, and I think we all can do better and continually improve, can't we? David, do you want to add anything to that?
Sure. I often get asked by clients that understand the e-colors pretty briefly, isn't this tool, is this it, right? Is it that simple? But the reality is that some of these simple tools that are beneficial to ourselves are probably harder to actually implement long term than what we give them credit for. So it may be easy to understand your own tendencies and style, but how does that actually play out in situations and how we can manage it to the best of our abilities? That's certainly a lifelong journey that we need to follow.
And I would add to that as well, the self-awareness piece. I mean, Greek philosophers told us to know thyself, right? And Bob Proctor, you always used to say, know your strengths and your weaknesses, Mark. And I always remember thinking when he said that, well, before I ever met Lewis and Equilibria, any of you guys, I remember thinking like, well, how am I supposed to know that? I mean, I know I've got a few things that I might be quite good at, but how am I supposed to know? I don't know. And then I did my first e-colours report and did the questionnaire, and it was spooky. And I asked you for it a while ago, David, didn't I, to reference it? But as a 20 years a music man, as a DJ, my first e-colours was yellow blue, and it said you like people, you like parties, you're musically orientated. It's just this amazing. I was like, whoa. I've just done a little questionnaire, and suddenly you're describing the last 20 years of my life. How does that work? And then the bit. Obviously, it came from the oil rigs, we'll touch on that a little bit later. High risk environment. My personality diversity indicator said your personality could also get you hurt or even killed by jumping in to help someone else without thinking. And I read that and I was like, hang on a minute, you're describing the next 20 years of my life here as well. And to me, that was just it was a real win. And I was engaged straight away. And I remember I sent Lewis an email. I tracked him on LinkedIn, sent him an email, and went, right, we need to talk. And here we are 10 years later. So, but look, let's talk a little bit about the ethics as well, because the ethical piece of e-colours and Equilibria is really powerful. In fact, I'm doing some work with Kinetic and the Ministry of Defence at the moment here in the UK. And one of the really smart people in one of those teams said to me, knowing about the ethics of Equilibria and e-colours is as important as knowing about the material that you're sharing. And I said to her, thank you. That's amazing. I'm going to use that. So thanks, Lana. I've done it. There you go. But I'm going to be using that. I use that everywhere now because it's just as important, the ethical side of it. David, do you want to give us anything on your perspective on that before I go to Laura?
Yeah, fully agree. I think as with any tool or any process that we can implement, there's definitely the how-to and the way we implement it is key. And from an ethical perspective, generally speaking, they're really that's really where these types of tools, and I want to think that the e-colours is nothing different in that sense, is where things make or break. If we use them to single out people in any way, to assume too much about somebody else, to make a profile in our minds about a personality style, then we're taking things to a point that we're not really utilizing it ethically. And that certainly leads to a misuse and a loss of potential.
Absolutely can do. Yeah, Laura, would you like to add to that, Laura?
I think what comes to mind, and I think David said it very well, but one of the things that, when people first get exposed to the e-colours particularly, and I'll speak to that, sometimes the initial reaction may be, this feels like you're putting me in a box. And I think that's the differentiator. The ethics and going about it in an ethical manner is how you ensure that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
So by utilizing an ethical approach, you can actually help people get out of the box that they may have put themselves in unintentionally. So what do I mean by that? If I think, well, this is my personality and this is who I am and this is the way I'm always going to be, and I don't seek ways to continue to grow or to realize my potential, I've pretty much built a box for myself. And if we utilize the colors in a way where it's like, hey, Mark, let's say yellow, red, and you are, like you said, the partier, the socializer, the this, the that. Therefore, we're only going to give you projects or tasks that involve these things, when we know that we are all capable of so much more than just our natural tendencies. So that's why I think the ethics is so key, is when we utilize an ethical approach, we help people get out of their natural box that they may have put themselves in, and we ensure that we continue to realize our potential individually, as teams, as families, etc.
Because I can run a spreadsheet as you well know.
Yes, you can, and you have shown us that. So, and a very detailed one at that.
Thank you very much. Yeah. So the point, just before the call, I did share with Laura and David my amazing spreadsheet that I'm running for the work I'm doing, and yeah, so there you go. I was looking for a bit of praise, and I've got it. So anyway, my point is actually that we can dip into any of these areas, can't we, at any time, and it's about understanding our potential. And one of the things I love about the coaching tool and what we do is helping people realize potential and improve every single day, as we all do as well. And some of the language as well is really important to me. I'm very hot on it's a style, not a type. We're personality styles, aren't we? We're not typing people. We're not boxing people. Some of those older tools, and there's plenty of them out there, is some of those older tools we used for hiring and firing and promotion and all that kind of stuff as well. And again, you can't just do that based on someone's personality. There's loads more to a human being than just their personality. And we talk about the iceberg analogy, don't we? The tip of the iceberg is the personality, but everything you've studied, your subconscious, all the things you've learned, all the things you've grown, that's the human being there. And it's not a test. I get lots of people say, I'm doing this test. I'm like, listen, no one's failed to have a personality yet. So shall we just call it an indicator or an assessment? You know what I mean? You're going to have a personality. It is not a test. You cannot pass or fail it. So again, these languages and this language that we bring in, I feel is modern. It's up to date. It's ethical. It's positive. And the piece as a coach, for me, that was always the appeal for me. I love to coach. I'm fascinated by humanity, and I'm fascinated by the percentages of the answers that come out from the indicator when people take the questionnaire. So I've always loved it from the moment I experienced it from my own personal report for the first time. So, and I love seeing that as well. I love seeing people getting that light bulb moment and going like, ding, like, whoa, hang on a minute, So it's really powerful. And there's lots of other tools out there, but I believe we've got a modern one, and also I don't believe any of the other tools have the ethics that we have, to the best of my knowledge. So ultimately, I think that if you haven't found out your e-colors, then go to equilibria.com and take your questionnaire. You can find out for free, and you'll get even for free, you'll get a nice little indicator of your top 2 colors. So it's an interesting piece, and I urge you all to go and do it. So let's talk about the family. Let's talk about growing up. Lewis Senior is a guy that I've respected for many years. I'm now my golf buddy, along with you guys, and a fantastic man. And I'm sure he was always that way. I'm sure he's always a brilliant father. Just leading you up the garden path here. But I've read at the end of the day, in fact, Lewis very kindly signed me a copy of At the End of the Day, which is your book as well, Laura. Of course, Lewis and Laura write this together. There you are. Look. It's an amazing book, and I highly recommend it. And actually, reading that book made it okay for me to write Life Remixed. So I'm really grateful to you all for doing that. So tell me a bit about what it was like growing up with Lewis Senior, the oil and gas man, traveling all over the world. What was that like for you, Laura?
So the way I've actually been reflecting on this over the last little while, and I think the way I would define Lewis's kind of journey, you could say, as a father, not as a incredible leader and all of the things that we all know, is a shift from unintentional to intentional. So if I think about like the years that I can remember more vividly, that's probably like personally my teenage years, etc. Because beyond a certain point, it gets a little bit blurry in terms of I remember him not being there for long periods of time, when he was working offshore, and that whole dynamic. And very, very, very early days, I remember when David and I were little, sometimes when he came back home, and my mom wanted us to do things with him, and that whole dynamic of him being offshore, we were a little bit intimidated because it's like, well, who's this person, that just all of a sudden showed up after a month?
So he'd be month on, month off a lot of the time, right?
Yeah. So early years for sure. So there were, funny moments like that. And I'm sure anyone who has a parent who travels a lot, and especially, in earlier years, it can be challenging. And it can be challenging for the parent that stays at home as well, because you have to play good cop, bad cop, mom and dad, and all the kind of things that we know. But in terms of the years that, like I said, I remember more vividly in the teenage years, it was the time when Lewis was, I would say, really, really leaning into his personality tendencies without really managing them that much. So his colors are yellow, red, like yours, Mark. So you probably can relate. Loves to help people. Loves, at that point, he was doing a lot of speaking, not a whole lot of listening. So, if he was home, he was mostly on the phone. And he actually got recognized for the former company that he used to work with at one point for having the largest phone bill out of the whole company. He actually has that framed somewhere, which is hilarious. Yeah. So, he loved to talk and he loved to help people. And he was in roles during the time that, myself being like 4 years older than David, a little bit kind of earlier on, you could say, for him. But he, to me, my experience was, he was always working. And, when he was there, it was kind of in moments or in bits of pieces in time. And again, he wasn't a great listener from a family environment standpoint either, because he was very much leaning into this natural style of the yellow red. So that's kind of how I remember it more vividly. And obviously with my colors being red, yellow, we did clash a little bit, and
a little bit.
A little bit. We did clash a little bit. And I think also because our mom's colors are blue over green, so my colors are totally opposite to hers. So he would try and help that dynamic, but that help sometimes was not received well. So that's really what I remember. And I'm actually curious to hear David, because he obviously has a very different personality style to me, and he probably kind of sees things differently looking back as well.
I will go to David in a moment, but I would you class yourself, do you think, as a bit rebellious when you were younger? Was there a bit of a rebel thing in you? I know there was in me for sure. David's not. There was in me as a yellow red. I was the eldest son. I've got a younger brother, and similar dynamic to yourselves actually. I'm yellow red. My brother's blue green, and I was the rebellious one, and my brother was the peacemaker. He's kind of what I'm going to go to David about in a minute. But is that something that you would relate to?
I would say I paved the way for David very well. So I stretched the comfort level of my parents, I think, as much as it could be stretched, and I think it made their experience with David's teenage years a lot easier. But yeah, I definitely went through a rebellious phase, and I think one of the things that when we talk about red, yellow, color combinations, one of the ways that we can get hurt is by getting annoyed. And when I think of that word, I think I spent like the better part of 4 years being annoyed, with the world, with everything around me. And it was definitely hard. I got good grades. I was a good student and all of these things, but still there was very much that rebellious side. Definitely went through a very gothic phase that, sometimes when I look at pictures, I'm like, oh, it's kind of hard to look at. But
I kind of need to see them myself, I think. But we'll revert back to that in a minute, because it's really interesting. Sure. But one of the things you said, I remember you saying about Lewis was we were playing golf. I think Lewis wasn't there, and I was over for the weekend with my friend Pete. And I said, where is Lewis? And you just looked at me and you went, he's somewhere in the world, and as long as he's helping someone, he's happy. And I remember laughing, and I went, yeah, that's me. Yeah, I'm the same as that. So I thought that was really cool. So Laura, thank you. So David, rebellious older sister, father absent on rigs a lot of the time. You must have had a nightmare. It must have been really tough for you.
No, it was all good. I mean, to be honest, I think I had a really kind of easy and charming, and like Laura said, she did pave the way. Because, by the time I was, wanting to go out and go to friends' house and things like that and stay the night, the level was like going to Ibiza for 3 or 4 days, and I was just, out for a night. So I was good, but it's all I needed, and I was happy with it. So it was easy. And, I think we've always had a great relationship, to be honest. And I've been more in my own head, more doing my own thing as I was growing up, and always a mama's boy too. So didn't really need Lewis that much. So it was great. It was all good from my perspective. And also, Laura was really the biggest source of anxiety in the house, to be honest. I mean, it really was.
For herself as well as everyone else, by the sound. But yeah, but yeah. So interestingly, my younger brother's e-colors are blue green, and my mum's blue green as well. And you're blue yellow, but borderline to blue
green, borderline, yeah.
Yeah. So quite easily, your relationship with your mother was kind of quite calm and easy for you to grow up. And as you say, I remember you saying you always had a comfortable life. It was, if you needed a bike, you got a bike, and it was all pretty okay, And
actually told me the other day, Mark. This was like last week. She said, I really, really miss hanging out just with your brother because, we could do all these things together. And I just kind of looked at her. They do have a very calm energy together for sure, even to this day. So It's not, it's not just something in the past.
No, absolutely not. And I think the journey, which we'll come to, obviously, for e-colors and the way it's impacted your family and then turned into this amazing business globally, I think is it's beautiful. It's a great story, and it's helped. Your story has helped many, many, many other people as well, and that's why obviously we're making this video and this interview together. But Laura, is it fair to say that your mum, as a high blue, was not a big decision maker a lot of the time, and that might have frustrated you as a red e-color?
Oh, hugely, because it's so interesting that you mentioned that, because we laugh about it even now, and I even used some of her undecisiveness sometimes to try and balance out my being too decisive at times. So I remember, especially in those kind of rebellious years, going like, can I do this or can I do that? And her answer in Spanish was always "ya veremos," which means "we will see." There was always a kind of gray, blurry answer. And to be honest, I actually just wanted a yes or a no. And that's kind of what would really, really, I would say, make me react a little bit. It's like, well, just tell me yes or no. But, she always kind of really went for that. We'll see.
Yeah. And that sort of very mellow kind of approach from her, didn't always feed into exactly what you wanted, right? Which is I think is a key thing for any parent understanding how to communicate with their child, right? So, and I've seen this bring families together in an amazing way, for sure.
I would actually say that even not just parents, but in relationships, if you think about an argument, if you think about trying to resolve an argument, my natural style is I want to get this fixed. I want to get it resolved. I want to get to an outcome. And many times, my mom has said, just give me some space, give me some time, like leave me alone. It's one of these things, like I want to get it fixed right now. And I know that, I'm very aware of that even in my personal relationships. I do have a tendency to not want to go to bed with things unresolved when it comes to any kind of argument.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting. And you also made the comment there about if you're being too decisive, and that's one of the things we say in the training is you can overplay strengths as well, right? Strengths are strengths, and they're useful. I'm talkative and it's engaging and interesting, I hope, a lot of the time. But if I overplay it and I'm too talkative, that becomes a bit nauseating. And knowing that pause button and that off switch is a useful tool for understanding strengths, but also managing potential limiters as well. So yeah, really interesting to hear both of your perspectives, shall we say, on growing up with a yellow-red father and a blue-green mother, which again is quite interesting. My wife and I, as you all know Emma. I'm yellow-red and Emma's green-blue, and it's good to actually to have that balance much of the time in any environment. It's a useful thing. I didn't plan it that way, but guess what? That's what happened, right? So yeah, let's talk about how you started working with Equilibria, because I've got Lewis's story, obviously the way that Lewis and Paul and the rest of the team, the four of them got together They had their first business meeting at the hotel that I like to stay at in Alicante, shall we say, or La Lucia. I won't say Benidorm. I did. Anyway, but the point is that, they had that meeting there. They put this company together, and the company was put together specifically at the time to reduce serious incidents and even fatalities on high risk oil and gas platforms, around the world, offshore mainly. How did you get involved? Let's start with Laura, because obviously you were the older. How did you get involved, and what was it like?
Well, for me, it was really interesting because I was seeing what Lewis was doing for the last kind of couple of years leading up to them forming the company, and how he had shifted his focus very much to coaching and developing people and developing leaders, and seeing the impact that he was having at the time. I thought it was very interesting. And at the time, there wasn't a lot of people in the marketplace, you could say, or in general, talking about coaching or talking about these things. So it was my first exposure to hearing something along that line. It wasn't as, popular to, have a coach or, for someone to kind of seek that kind of a support. So that was the first thing that kind of piqued my interest, is that they were going into this environment of supporting people, helping, developing. And I think that appealed to my yellow side very much. And the other thing that happened was, I can't remember exactly what the project was, but he had asked me to translate quite a lot of the materials at the time, given that, both David and I are bilingual and so on and so forth. And that actually made me at the time look and really do a deep dive into a lot of the things that they were doing. So one thing led to another. He opened the door and asked if, I wanted to get involved. And the moment that I kind of proved to myself that I could be in that environment and be successful, I've never looked back since. It just felt like such a natural fit. And I think it also played into the adventurous side of me in many ways. So that's really how I got involved from the beginning.
So before I go to David, I remember Lewis telling me that when he started Equilibria and he started to go onto the rigs and started to talk about coaching and stuff like that, a lot of the e-colors and associated tools, it was called Lewis's warm and fuzzy stuff, which he says he hasn't heard for about 15, 20 years, which is, thank goodness, right? But I don't like the term soft skills either. These are people skills, right? Important skills to have, leadership skills to have. Did he change after his, the collapse that he wrote about in chapter 1? Was it a real kind of like sort of night and day change from him being kind of not listening as much to actually really turning into this, like, Yoda coach that we like to call him now, right? Was that immediate, or was that a gradual thing?
I would say it was pretty drastic.
Yeah.
It was very drastic. And it's interesting because the first couple of years of working with the company, there were many times that I bumped into people that knew him, and I maybe bumped into them when he wasn't there. And when they would see my surname, they would go, "Oh, are you Lewis's daughter?" And I would hear comments such as like, "Man, I can't even imagine what it must be like living with your dad. He like talks nonstop, but he doesn't listen." I literally had these conversations with people, and I would say to them, "No, he's really, really changed."
Yeah.
So it was quite drastic. And I know, I'm not sure how much David remembers this, but right after he had the collapse and when he got back home, it was like something out of a movie, because very closely after that happened, he had polyps removed from his throat, and he was forcefully quiet, 100% quiet. I think it was like 10 to 14 days or something, where he could not talk at all. So it was like having this person around the house that normally, you could hear a lot, and all of a sudden you'd see this sign, like, "I want tea," or "Come and sit
I've got
down.
loads of Post-it notes.
Come and sit down with me for a while." Like, okay, so It was drastic. There was a lot of things that kind of culminated and came together, the collapse, him having his polyps removed, but it was a really, really big shift, I would say. That's the way I remember it.
So I'm coming back to you in a minute about how you ended up in Houston, and how you discovered you were a kind of top color red. So I'm coming back on that in a second. But before we do that, David, what's your experience of getting involved with the company? Because it was slightly different, wasn't it?
Yeah, a bit different. With the company itself, I'd say, well, with the e-colors and not even the e-colors, excuse me, personality instruments. Lewis had been working with several over the years, and I've had some exposure to that. We had the privilege of attending some of the workshops that he was already running. So you start getting aware of your tendencies and understanding these processes, but at an early age. And depending on each individual's journey, it's all going to be a bit different. For me, it was more about self-reflection, understanding my natural tendencies and traits, starting to get on a path and being able to manage my top color blue, you could say, tendencies, which after, throughout school and then university, it's starting to become really relevant to do so, to be effective in the classroom, in a teaming environment, and when you're working on a group project, and just to push yourself to certain situations that you don't want to let sometimes your personality get you out of having maybe a good time, or maybe studying hard. It really depends on the environment, but just having that reflection moment to know that you can manage those tendencies. But then the actual involvement with the company came in the form of a placement. I was going through my business administration degree and had to do a placement within the university. And I reached out and said, it'd be awesome to be able to do something with Equilibria. And then what they came back with was actually heading to Thailand in what were our main regional offices back then, and did a month in the office, and got to learn a lot more about the administrative processes, but also the materials, the tools, etc. And then as I was getting closer to completing that, then did an MBA and actually got offered, again, after another conversation, a possibility to be able to join the company. And to do that, the program, the idea was to start by experiencing the coaching side of the business. Very familiar with e-colors at this stage, very familiar with the company. I had been running several, throughout my master's program, used the company as an example to create, scenarios of growth and things like that. But the actual coaching side of things, understood the process, but never actually got into it from the self perspective. So I can remember one of the first sessions I ever did with about 60 people. And this was one of my first exposures, being pushed to speak in public and run a session, which I knew very well. But just the act of speaking in public was nerve-wracking for me. Yeah, absolutely. Not so much anymore because I manage it, but certainly not within my natural tendencies. Right.
First time you did it, it must have been.
Yeah, first time was terrible. Felt terrible, yeah. But it wasn't that bad.
No. Yeah.
It was actually a great outcome. I was fortunate to be together with Dakin Tromberg, one of the, may he rest in peace, with one of the founders of the company, great mentor of mine. And everything started there. It was just such a great stretch opportunity balanced with doing something which I truly love, which is to help people and to see people realize their potential. And, for me, it's very personal. It's not so much, I would say, my focus area. I absolutely expect the organizational, the team benefits, the great things that people get out of leveraging the tools from the perspective of an organization hiring us. But to me, the motivation is when you see people really realize something about themselves, about others, about their family members, and making an impact in their lives at a more personal side of things, which I think is inevitable with these tools. That really kind of was extremely motivating, together with that challenge of having to own the role of that kind of coaching and facilitation, which wasn't natural. That made it for a very great kind of start. And many years later, now nearly 14, it's new challenges every day, but it still is a very kind of, you could say, interesting and complex role to be a part of the company.
Absolutely. And, it's interesting as well, as a blue, yellow, blue, green, tendency, with the blues, reluctant to speak up can be a potential limiter. And yet yourself and Ian Collins, also top color blue as well. two of the longer standing coaches in the company, both top color blues. I think that really proves the ethics of e-colors, of not putting people in boxes, because it's not a natural thing. I mean, when I first did it, I was a yellow blue, and so the sweaty palms, the needing the drinks of water, the nerves of public speaking. I'm right there with you, mate. I promise you. I was for me to go and do my events to 150 people at a time was just but I did it because I knew it was something I really had to overcome and face a fear and get past it, and now it's quite a comfortable thing for me. But yeah, as a top color blue coach, I think it's really inspiring for you to tell that story, and the fact that you still coach, you still facilitate, and now you enjoy it. Is that all fair to say?
Absolutely. And again, I wouldn't say it's within the wheelhouse, like that's something I would do so naturally, but it's certainly something I've owned and can enjoy now. Yeah.
Can I just mention something on this? Because David and I have had the chance to co-facilitate many times. Actually, just not that long ago, we both did a big event in Venezuela, and I think there was like almost 200 people in the room, or it was a very, very large group. And every single time that I get the chance to hear him speak, I'm always interested, even if I've heard what he's going to say before, because he puts things across in a way that it does kind of bring you in and make you want to listen. So I'm not just saying this because I'm his older sister and I'm proud of him, which I'm obviously very proud of him, but I love listening to him speak. And I think that sometimes it's easier for me to listen to him speak than it is to listen to other people that have similar styles to me or that are very comfortable in front of people, because I think that just that ability to get over, his potential limiters draws you in.
I absolutely agree. And one of the things I would add to that as well is that when Emma and I co-facilitate, it becomes very, very clear who's the yellow, red, and who's the green, blue. People just see it. I'm there, all gesturing and animated and everything else, and Emma's all cool and calm, and and actually, when we get to the end of a session, very, very often, red, yellows, and yellow, reds will come and talk to me, and green, blues, and blue, greens will just gravitate to Emma. It's just natural. They just go to Emma because they want to talk to Emma more about, what it's like to be a blue, green, and a green, blue. So there's something very powerful in that actually, vibration, resonation of personality and indeed character, brings people, people go to the people they feel naturally in tune with. And that's why I think it's so important that we all work together as a team wherever we are, because it can't just be, the one person show in any context. So seeing you two present together, I'm sure would be very much like, seeing myself and Emma, and there's some other great practitioners and people working together as well. I think it's really, really good advice to get that sort of harmonious presentation. So, Laura, let's circle back to you being sent away. I believe the story was that your mother might have got to such a point that she said, right, go and spend some time in Houston with your father, for whatever reason. We don't need to go there. But you were basically beautifully sent away, and you had an experience in Houston, obviously, with an e-color session that Lewis was presenting.
So I think the way I would describe it was she was up to here. I think it was summer. And it was like, oh, you just can't deal with her anymore. I think at the time I may have been like 16 or 17. This was actually with a prior tool that Lewis was utilizing before e-colors, but similar in nature. You could say like a lot of the tools out there, similar in nature. And I had an experience where I was grouped with people from my own personality style or a similar personality style. They were very different age group to myself at the time. I mean, like I said, I was 16, 17. I think everybody that I was grouped with was at least 35 plus. All of them at the time men, all of them from an oil and gas background, a lot of them from the southern states of the US. So you could not have got any more different than, in terms of background, etc. And I remember we were doing some kind of activity or exercise together, and it was just like being with everybody who kind of thought and acted in a very similar way. And I was immediately like, yeah, this, I feel right at home with these people. That's actually what it felt like. So it was a huge realization about personality styles. I remember before that point, I don't think I had really thought about it or looked at it. And it was a real turning point for me.
Absolutely. And yeah, I mean, now I'm putting myself as the, 35, 50, 40, 50-year-old guy with this 16-year-old goth girl, daughter of Lewis is running the session. And yet she's exactly like us. And it must have been quite a realization for everyone involved. I would assume.
I would say so.
Yeah, brilliant. I love it. And yeah, what a great way. I think it's one of the first things that eColors taught me when I got my first eColors report. The first thing was it's okay to be me. Okay, great. I'm a yellow blue. Here's my personality diversity. It was a basic report at the time. Here it is. And it's okay to be me. Okay, because there's lots of other people that are like me. Okay, great. And then there's lots of other people that are not like me, and therefore I better learn how to communicate with them and that's a continuous improvement piece. Even in my relationship with Emma, I'm continually learning how to communicate better with a top color green. It's just an ongoing thing in our relationship, but it's part of the fun, right? So but you put that into work environments as well, and getting people to work together. It's continuous improvement and continuous positive challenge to learn how to deliver information in a way that the other person is going to be able to take that on. So yeah, really, really good, and such a positive thing to have brought to the world, and good to hear your stories about how you get into, or how you got into it. Were there any challenges being son and daughter of David? I'll go to you first. Were there any challenges being Lewis's son, one of the boss's sons, or the boss's son? And I noticed that you both called him Lewis. And I know there's a little story behind that, so why don't you share about that as well? But David, for you first, were there any challenges for you in that area?
Well, the story, I think, may be more with Laura in this case, with Lewis, because I actually, has just out of natural, have called him Lewis for like I was way too young. That never kind of came out, especially in Spanish. It was just not so much, but yeah, and. So that's pretty funny. But no, I'd say more like self-induced pressure than anything else. Lewis is just incredible at providing opportunities to succeed. And I think people, if anything, have been very kindly, I would say even more kind in listening to myself. I don't want to say us. Laura may have a different example, but from the situations whereby there's that knowledge that I'm Lewis's son in an environment that he's, well known, well respected, I'd say it only helps for people to listen more intentionally. And if there's any roadblocks, it's just your self-induced pressure wanting to do well.
So that's a really good take on it. Yeah. So thank you for sharing that, David. Laura, how did it come around that you all call him Lewis now rather than Dad? And were there any challenges?
I think that I've actually called him Lewis quite a lot, and I think maybe it's a Spanish thing, maybe not. I'm not sure, because actually many times I also call our mom Isabel or Isa. And I remember early on saying, well, why don't you call me mom? And I have to say that I think if I think of the times that, I did call him dad or something like that, it usually when I wanted something. So but definitely in the professional environment, when it comes to credibility and when it comes to being professional, I think you have to very quickly draw the line. And, I think there are a couple of times where I may have like almost gone to say dad or something like that, especially when you're frustrated about something. And I go, nope, it's definitely more of a professional environment. In terms of the challenges, I think kind of to David's point, I have had a couple of experiences that, I wouldn't say were very pleasant, but I think they probably involve more who I am and what I look like more than specifically being, well, actually there was one time that I recall at the beginning, And, it just kind of shows that we have come a long way when it comes to the conversation around diversity. But, I was kind of asked, oh, you carrying your dad's briefcase or something like that in those words. And, I just remember, me being, if I would have been a different e-color combination, I would have really taken that to heart.
Yeah.
But what actually went through my mind, and I'm going to give you the censored version, is like, okay, idiot, whatever whatever. So, and then things like, I have heard things in rooms like, oh, if it were easy, women and children would do it. I'm like, I have heard those things, and now that would be like absolutely like, oh my gosh, there's absolutely no way that you would hear that. But to David's point, I think the real challenge for me was I had to realize I am not Lewis. I cannot facilitate in the way he does. I cannot, try and be him because I'm not him. And that is absolutely okay. When you are working with someone who is very inspirational and who you look up to, I think there's a certain point where you want to hold yourself to a standard, but holding yourself to a standard doesn't mean you have to become that person. You have to just become the best version of you and the best version of your true, authentic self that you can really put across. And that's what's really kind of attractive to people and that you can really make a difference. So I think that was probably the biggest challenge. I would say that it took me about 2 years to really kind of lean into, after starting working with a company, of realizing that I have to be the best version of what I can be as a facilitator, as a coach, but I am not trying to be him.
No, so it's a really interesting point, actually. I've worked with intentional leadership and yourselves with certain clients already, and certainly, I've said to people, are you leaders? And in a room of 40 people, maybe you get like 3 or 4 hands go up, and I'm like, no, stop. Okay, you're all leaders. Yeah, you just got different ways of doing it. Yellows will be inspirational leaders. Yes, okay, but we don't all have to try and be like the top color yellow, right? There'll be the strategic leader, the green. There'll be the empathy leader with the blue. There'll be the directive leader with the red. But there'll be leaders, and in different ways. And I think it's the human being understanding themselves and then applying that leadership style. I think is where the power is for the individual to be able to improve and realize their potential. So, yeah, really, really important. And I'm glad there wasn't lots of challenges for you. I have heard Lewis. I have actually asked Lewis on the golf course. I noticed that Laura and David don't call you dad. What was that about? And he said basically that he was on a rig somewhere, and someone's actually pulled him to one side and said, they can't call you dad. You have to sort that one out. And I think it's great. I love it. It's just such a nice, fun family dynamic that you all have, and such an effective and successful one. And it's not all families are like that. So I think it's really lovely to observe. And I'm grateful to call you friends and now colleagues. So it's very, very positive. So I always remember reading a book. I've never worked offshore. I'm sure I will do at some point, but I've never worked offshore. But I do remember reading a book called Don't Tell Mum I Work on the Rigs. Tell Her I'm a Pianist in a Whorehouse. And I remember the title. I was like, what is this? And I remember reading it, and it was just hysterically funny. And I don't know, is there anything that sort of jumps out at you, that there's sort of, stories that you can share that won't, curl everybody's toes up or anything? But, is there any stories or things that have happened? Yeah, because it's a strange environment to be out there for even a few weeks or whatever. It must be quite tough.
Well, I have to say, and I do think David and I have different experiences when it comes to this. I love that kind of industrial environment. So my husband actually works on a production platform now. So he's not on an oil rig, he's on a platform, but it's kind of that industrial setting. And sometimes I will say to him, like, some days I wish I could change myself with you, because it is like, I do love that kind of feeling of, you work hard, you see the results of what you do in a very kind of controlled ecosystem in a way. Sometimes you have 100, 200, 300 people working there, and you can make a very quick impact on culture depending on how you influence others, how you lead. most of the time you're out there for a period of time, depending on what country or region you're in. It may be a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, or even more. And, basically the people who you work with, you end up spending way more time with them than you spend with your family when you're at home, because you're there like, every hour of the day. You're having breakfast together, lunch, you're having dinner together, any recreation time is together. So there have been a couple of, really interesting experiences at the beginning, everything from like,
are you choosing your words carefully there?
like, survival training, and like, being put upside down in a helicopter. But again, as I mentioned before, I am quite adventurous by nature. So I love those opportunities. And I knew they were experiences that you would be very hard pressed to get in any other industry. And the other thing as well is that if you have an open mind, people will surprise you. You go out there and you think, oh, it's going to be very kind of testosterone driven, lots of men, etc. But you end up meeting people who are extremely kind, who have an artistic side, who want to talk to you about their family. Like, you never know until you kind of open yourself up to those experiences. And yes, I have been in a situation where I was, along with the medic on the particular rig I was on, we were the only women out there, I think out of like 200 people. And people have said, well, how was that? And, and I said to them, we, coming from where I come from in Spain, actually, it was a much easier situation in some cases than just walking down the street. People very, very professional. And yes, there's, in some cases, not the most comfortable situation, but it is, if you're open to it, it can be, very character building for sure. And it does teach you a lot about yourself as well, to kind of put you in a situation that is not, you could say, comfortable, but very unique.
I remember seeing the Piper Alpha documentary, and I remember, obviously, huge disaster, but I remember one particular guy being interviewed about that, and he said he's seen people be on the helicopter out to the oil platform. And then, they've got the job, they're there to do the work, they're meant to, and they literally just sort of look out and they look around and they can't see any land for like, well, at all. And they just go, nope. And they stay in a helicopter and they go home, and it's not for everyone.
No, I think the longest trip that I took out was like almost 2 hours or something. So you think about it, you're out there and you're 2 hours away from, land.
By helicopter. That's
by the way, I've never been on a cruise. And everybody's like, oh, you should go on a cruise. I'm like, I'm really attracted to that. It's like, it really doesn't do it for me. But that's I am very grateful for those experiences. And now that I'm working a lot more at the kind of leadership, management, executive level, I do miss it sometimes. I do miss that kind of offshore side of things sometimes.
Well, you never know. We're doing a lot of business development, so you never know what might happen. We've got the story. We've got some amazing testimonials, which I'll touch on a little bit later. The work that's been done. I remember we've got a team of practitioners actually, and if people want to become eColors practitioners, myself and David generally do the training for that, and we're happy to bring people in so they can use the great work that's been done. But I did have one of the practitioners when we were talking about the backstory and Lewis and Paul and everything else, the founders, and one guy said, I love the backstory. It's the Red Adair story. He's like, I love it. It's really heroic. I was like, well, yeah, you should probably talk to Laura and David about, I'm not sure it's heroic, but at the end of the day, they're there and they're doing their job and they're getting it done. And look, let's be clear, the world has relied on fossil fuels and energy for a long, long time, and certainly it's been important work. And yes, there's been some high level disasters and loss of life and all kinds of stuff, in order to do that. So actually, I remember Lewis saying in a video that Lewis and I made when he was trying to talk to the crew, and he was like, what are we missing? What are we missing? And for me, it's the question, do you think that different personality styles see and manage risk differently? And I think that's such an important question, because as soon as you ask that question, you can say to people, what do you think? And you can have the debate, but generally, the answer is that we all see it slightly differently, and we've all got different viewpoints, and if we can appreciate those viewpoints, we can actually get a better result. David, you got anything to add to any of that?
Yeah, appreciate the viewpoints or create robust systems that, allow for human failure or human error, which is really kind of key to the long-term sustainable, you could say safety results that people desire. Because if, we thought for a very long time that we were very much in the business of human performance from the perspective of understanding how humans perform, behave, what they do. But when we were partner introduced to Fisher Improvement Technologies in a joint project that we ended up starting with a client, which has now become coming up to 10 years now of a working relationship with them. It's a whole different kind of a level when you really understand what drives the impact of systems in the, you could say, behavioral impact that they have on human beings deciding what to do, and then how personality also plays a role into that.
No, absolutely. And, we understand that eColors is different because it started from safety. But, we've got so many different uses of, eColors, from team building, the leadership piece, which we're going to touch on, the advanced error reduction, the 8 essentials of high performing teams, all of this work that's been developed over the last 20 years very much from the work that Lewis and then yourselves continued with started and then continued with. The scope of support of humanity through all of these different lenses is really powerful, right? So yeah, look, I mean, if we revert back to the family slightly, I know David's you've got a blue yellow wife, I believe. Her top colours are blue and yellow, and Jeff. Yep. Jeff, your husband is a top color red, or red green, in your life, Laura. The whole family dynamic. I think I already know the answer to this question, but I want other people to hear it. David, has that really cemented your family relationships in every area? Going forward, you've just recently, you've been a father before, but you just recently become a father again. Cemented relationships with your family and everyone around you. Is it a real solid thing when you look at personality diversity in that way?
Yeah, absolutely, and I think it becomes the great platform from where to build from. Because again, even when we really understand the e-colors and personality tendencies and what we do, we also understand and want to look at more in terms of who the person is rather than their tendencies. So sometimes perhaps we can accept certain tendencies that may disengage us because we understand that's kind of a whole lot more to the individual. And oftentimes in relationships, it's also interesting. So this is just anecdotal, but I do see that in couples, it sometimes tends to be opposites or sames, which sounds like the whole spectrum, right? But I mean, very specifically from an e-colors perspective. So Mark, of course, you would be a really clear example of opposites. And for myself and Stefania, will be more in the kind of similar space. But oftentimes in that relationship aspect, not even being fully conscious, I'm not going to lie, of managing my tendencies, her tendencies, the atmosphere, the ecosystem, the couple actually sometimes balances out. So she could potentially portray me or see me more as green and red rather than blue and yellow, actually. And Laura and everybody that knows me knows that's not true or not accurate to my tendencies. But when it comes to the spectrum within the relationship, that's sometimes more of the role I take, because perhaps if not, it doesn't kind of work, or she'll take it every now and then. I'm not saying it's kind of traditional roles.
That's a really interesting point because for instance, when Emma's at work, she's decisive and she's doing her work and things like that, and she's almost green red, Emma, and she can be in that decisive mode and that sort of task orientated mode and getting things done. But then when she comes into the house, she wants to relax into green blue, and I will step up and I'll step into, the yellow side. It never goes away because it's 40% plus, but I'll step into the red there, and so Emma can relax into her blue and her empathy, for example. So yeah, I mean, we're not defining people here, and that's what I love about it. It's styles, isn't it? But it certainly brings, once you've got it, it brings people closer together, I think, and your families, all of your families are really an interesting point. And Laura, would you like to add to that for yourself?
I'll just say that I think with Laura, in fact, it probably had the biggest impact from a understanding and work relationship dynamic perspective. I mean, we already knew about the tendencies for a very long time, but actually just you could say getting to a level of maturity where we can really understand them and apply it with each other at the maturity level that we have within the e-college and the tool. As much as we love our family members, they're not all there in terms of full advocates and students of the game. They all know their e-colors, have gone through the basics and understand all of the concepts. But at the certain point, I think within the family environment, this is just an open suggestion. I think people have to go into these concepts as much as they want to. If you start becoming the preacher or the advocate, you can disengage people further.
Yeah, absolutely. And just a little add on to that as well. Frankie, our little French bulldog, was ill recently, and someone in our family who has very low blue percentage, has not done masses of study or anything like that, but has a very low blue percentage, said, just, get another one, and we were like, no, that doesn't work like that. But it helped us be more forgiving. It helped us be more, so again, it just helps people connect and get closer together. But yeah, Laura, do you want to add anything to that? Living in a red household?
Yes, very red household. So my husband's e-colors are red green, my e-colors are red yellow, and I think the biggest thing that this helps both of us on kind of almost like on a daily basis is we both have a tendency to be very independent by nature. And when you're trying to build a marriage that is a strong foundation, there's only so much independence that you can bring into that relationship. So we're aware of that, and we kind of try to, really kind of humbly become interdependent in a positive manner, and bring the walls down and not always say, I can do this by myself, and it's like, no, actually, can you help me with this? And that I think is really key. I think if I didn't know e-colors and he didn't know e-colors, I think it could be really maybe even not work, because you are maybe too independent by nature for the other person. So I think it really does help. It does make a big difference. And for me, the biggest thing as well, with the red yellow tending to be more, and I do think this really is a tendency that is very much alive, being more impatient by nature, or can be a little bit more reactive than someone whose e-colors are red green. I think that's where my kind of pause button comes in and goes, okay, you need to give this person like their time to process the information, or to really kind of be able to contribute to the decision. So I do think it, like David said, you have to maybe use it as a door to get to know the person and the character and the whole self. But when you are in a potential reactive space, be it more outwardly reacting or, shutting down, it does help to understand, okay, where is this coming from?
Yeah, absolutely. Whenever I felt myself, and when I was younger, I was quite impatient. And nowadays, I've grown sort of naturally, and I have this conversation with lots of people. Naturally, as we grow, we will develop more sort of patient traits potentially, and get ourselves. But the key with training, including e-colors in anything we do, the key with training is to get you there quicker. So something that might have taken like 5 years or 10 years, let's try and do it in a year, shall we? That kind of thing. That's the key to really getting somewhere and getting somewhere quickly. So yeah, and that ties in nicely actually as well to, there's a whole thing at the moment, that is really picking up pace here in the UK, and it's around the mental health agenda, and it certainly leads into culture. and psychological safety is a I don't like the word buzzword, but you know what I mean. Psychological safety is something that's on people's lips and it's on people's minds, and they're starting to think about it. And the more I hear it, I'm like, this is fascinating because everyone's talking about this psychological safety piece, and no one's making real sense of it. And then I'm sitting there with the work that we've done for the last 20 years from a personality perspective, that Mr. Yellow needs something different from Mrs. Red and Mr. Blue. You know, we all need, and my wife, Mrs. Green, you know, we all need something different around psychological safety. And part of my mission as well as this director with you guys is, you know, I want to bring out more of that. I want to do more study on that. I want to grow that idea more and more and more. You know, have you got anything? I mean, I've got Wendell just popped into my head there, you know, but there's stories, isn't there, of people genuinely being helped, understanding themselves better from a mental health perspective and indeed a psychologically safe perspective. David, have you got anything you want to add into that?
Well, I mean, from the mental health arena perspective and just the personal wellness perspective, it's like anything. It's a wonderful tool to get there. I mean, there's certainly more to take place. There's certainly other practices to bring on board, but I think the e-colors really works extremely well as a broad term sort of awareness and management of certain tendencies, and then we can go to work with different areas of opportunity. Then from a psychologically safe perspective, you're usually looking more, to me, in my mind, it's that kind of organization and team level. When you're talking about psychological safety, there's no one only person that owns it, right? So the understanding of personality tendencies together with the establishment, development, and maintaining of, you could see, I mean, I wouldn't know how to say it, but of correct practices in actually caring for the team and running the team, I think are absolutely key.
Absolutely. Sorry.
Thing, just to add to what David's saying there as well, is that you become more aware of how to build a psychologically safe environment when you understand personality tendencies. So what do I mean by that is, if I don't know anything about personalities, I'm not being intentionally, I'm not intentionally leading a team with personalities in mind, you can do things that are not inclusive. And it's not that you mean to do things that are not inclusive, but it can very quickly happen. So I'm going to give you an example. If you have someone that, let's say, is top color yellow or top color red, leading a team who hasn't done a lot of work on themselves, and they are just pushing forward and, you know, making decisions or in meetings, not really asking, hey, David, what's your perspective on this? Or giving David the time that he needs to be able to give his very valuable input. It could feel like you're basically bulldozing right, you know, over people because you haven't given them the space to be able to bring their ideas forward. You haven't created that inclusive environment. That can feel very non-psychologically safe. Same thing as if I say, oh, I'd like to get input, and David brings up an idea and I go, that's a terrible idea, or just shut it down. For someone that doesn't mind conflict, they're going to go, no, it's not. And then boom, 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 boom. But for someone that does not like conflict, they're going to go, well, see ya, I'm not going to speak up again. Yeah. So that there's certain things from a personality standpoint that if you're not aware of a tool like the e-colors, you can inadvertently very quickly destroy psychological safety just by playing into your natural tendencies.
Yeah, absolutely. Without even realizing. Yeah. I mean, I can easily take over, you know, so without meaning to, you know, I can go into a meeting and just take it over and just, you know, and perhaps not always get the best results out of that. And I definitely used to do that when I was younger. I'm doing my very, very best not to do that, you know, as I go forward, obviously. But yeah, really, really interesting piece around psychological safety. And I'm really pleased that we have this personality perspective and the information to back it up from the questions that we've asked of people, with this huge data lake of information that we've got that actually we can draw upon to create training, to create coaching, to really help individuals, teams, companies huge companies globally to create that culture. There's a lot of work to do for the next 20 years, people. So we need to keep going. And on that note as well, we've done some work with sports teams, and I remember talking to Lewis about the work that's been done with one of the water polo team, the US water polo team, and Lewis always tells me very, very clearly that they were winning Olympic silver, and he did e-colours with them, and they won Olympic gold, and he wants to take the credit for that. But I know he's only joking because there's a lot more to it than that. But certainly, there's been lots of work, hasn't there, with schools, with teams, with different teams. And I'm talking to sports teams here in the UK at the moment and looking for opportunities to introduce more of our tools into sports teams. We've gone into schools actually already. So we've got some testimonials from schools here. Any sort of favourite story that jumps out to you, David, around working with teams or bringing people together in those environments?
I think for sport, Laura is going to be a better person to go to. There was a lot more work that was being done some time ago, and I was not so involved.
Okay, Laura?
I would say that it is probably a huge highlight, the work that we did with the the US women's water polo team. I am watching the Olympics that is going on at the moment. I am in awe of the work that these athletes put in. And one of the things that I think is very, very clear to me is that, yes, the physical performance is hard. The training is absolutely incredible for any discipline, apart from maybe a few that are not as physically demanding. But the mental game, the ability to manage yourself, to manage your reactions, I do think that is a kind of make or break. And, a good example of that is Simone Biles. I mean, everybody is like, it's incredible what she's achieving. She was very open about speaking about, challenges with mental health and Tokyo Olympics and all this kind of stuff. So when you are providing tools to athletes to be able to really be on their best game, such as personal intervention and understanding their e-colors, understanding their teammates' e-colors, how to recognize each other, how to bring each other up, I do think it's a game changer. I know that from, again, the work that we did with the women's water polo team, I do think it can give you a cutting edge to be able to understand each other in ways that maybe other teams are not seeing. So I think definitely a highlight. So much respect for the work that, professional athletes have to do to be able to stay on their best game. And I think we can make a really big difference, and we've proven that.
Yeah, absolutely. And the physical work, of course, is amazing. But we all know that it starts in the mind, right? And if we can get the mind and the body working together, and it's split seconds sometimes, isn't it? But it's that getting the edge, what sports teams want. And guess what? That's what companies want as well. Companies want to get the edge over their competitors. They want to be that 1%, that little bit better, where they're performing, and they need to invest in their people in order to be able to do so. But if they do it and they do it well, and people like us come in with a wealth of background of information, everything that we've got, I think that we've proven, as you say, that we can make a real difference in companies in so many different ways. So great share. And just to round that bit off, I was watching the Olympic golf today, and that was more my kind of pace these days. But anyway,
that's physically demanding, but
it's 18 holes. They don't get a buggy.
Being a golfer myself, and I've reflected on this many times. Again, mental clarity and being able to, be committed to what you're doing, huge. To your point about companies and making a difference in companies, Mark, I do want to mention when people ask me, particularly sometimes, like, hey, so what is it that you do? I like to summarize it as we help create high performing environments, whatever it is if it's, sports or if it's companies, teams, or any organization. We help to create those high performing environments through the tools around not just personality diversity, but also how to lead intentionally and how to create an environment where, with our 8 essentials of high performing teams, people understand the vision and the values, they are clear on the roles, they are trusting each other and create the psychological safety. So I think that really kind of summarizes the outcome of what we do. Then there's the how we get there, but that creating high performing environments, I think really, to me as a top color red, really does encapsulate what we do.
And I've deliberately left a little gap there because we're going to edit that bit, because that bit there, that was a brilliant piece, Laura. Well said. It was really good. And yeah, you're right. Yeah, absolutely right. And yeah, that piece will definitely be an edit out of this, because creating those high performing teams in the various different ways we do it are really it's really our work and what we're all dedicated to. So yes, you've mentioned, obviously we've talked about the e-colors and personality diversity. We've got the 8 essentials of high performing teams, which again is part of a sort of circle of training where we take people through these stages. We've got the intentional leadership courses, and we also have the advanced error reduction in organizations. Let's touch on each of those. So we've done the e-colors, we've talked that through, and I think we've given some great perspectives on that. Who would like to talk about the 8 essentials in a bit more detail?
David, do you want to go ahead with that? I can probably take on a little bit of intentional leadership.
Yeah, that's what I thought, Lorena.
Sure, absolutely. So the 8 essentials is a by the way, it could be the essential leadership cycle containing the 8 essentials of high performing teams. That's the longest title that we have, but actually it's very effective in actually describing what it is. Because again, if a leader follows that cycle as a process, they'll be way on their way to actually intentionally lead and be able to create that high performing teaming environment. So it all starts with self and team awareness, which is not only about getting to know our, personality tendencies, which is a must, it's a baseline, but a lot more, how can we learn more about the individuals that contribute to our team? How can we really go that extra step to understand what, motivates and inspires all the people that we have? What about their, key hidden skills that they have that we may not know? So self and team awareness is certainly that foundation to accomplishment. And the first 3 we like to call driving elements, which are the ones that drive the resultant conditions, which is the rest. So after self and team awareness, you have shared vision and values. So understanding, what's the ultimate or the big picture objective of the team, the vision, the values, the goals, the objectives, the strategy, even the behavioral norms that we want to really kind of focus on as a team. And again, we do a lot of work in helping understand where these different teams are at from a kind of assessment perspective, and then understanding where we have to work on to effectively help people get to that, or teams get to that next level. So once we have that bigger picture strategy, that kind of vision, mission, etc., we have to focus that a bit further, so then we can focus on clarity of roles and processes. Ideally, with that clarity of roles and processes, there's different things to follow, like having roles, responsibilities, accountabilities, and authorities defined for each individual, and for the individuals to not only understand their own roles and processes, but those of others. So again, that's kind of back to self and team awareness in a way. So once we kind of really have that those first 3 well aligned and worked on, the driving elements, we can start to expect to see some of the resultant conditions. The first one being trust from an individual perspective, but also trust from a perspective of knowing people will fulfill their role, which again, that's kind of that key connection with that clarity of roles and processes. And then when there's enough trust in the team, we can effectively expect for people to be more comfortable in including the diversity that surrounds us. So that's why diversity and inclusion is that next one. After that, diversity and inclusion element of the 8 essentials, we start looking at commitment. It's kind of very easy to go to accountability. People want to focus on that, but to generate accountability, first we have to commit individually. So make our own kind of a story, commit to a certain path. As a team, oftentimes, if we have included a lot of people and perceptions or perspectives, we have to at some point commit to a direction. So once we commit to that direction, then we can start looking at accountability. First from the self perspective, holding ourselves accountable, then from that peer to peer, and of course the more traditional accountability top down. But we also want to look at positive accountability as well as kind of more in that kind of corrective accountability or traditional accountability model. If we're going through this cycle effectively, we'll ultimately start developing a learning and continuous improvement focused organization, which is what we all aspire to do. You know, things get stale and organizations, there's curves for products, for organizations. So we have to continue to learn and improve, if not, ultimately going off is the just becoming irrelevant.
There's no growth, is there? There's no growth. If it's not continuing improvement, then there's not going to be any growth there, and that cycle can then just keep continuing in from people, new people coming into the team and new developments and things like that. But yeah, it's an amazing piece of work, and I really enjoy training all of those 8 essentials to companies and just being the coach, right? That's what I love to do. So yeah, it's a great piece of work, and all through the lens of personality diversity is the key point, which is the differentiator, should I say, from any other tool that's out there. Let's put it that way. So thank you, David. That's great. Intentional leadership, Laura. Let's talk a bit more about that.
So intentional leadership is an approach. It's a suite of tools. It's a suite of different ways to be able to grow as a leader, to develop as a leader, to be able to make a difference, not just for yourself as an individual, but for the people who you are leading. So we talk about intentional leadership as a real key shift. An intentional leader is aware of their natural style, is aware of their team style, is aware of what their teams need in order to develop and to really create, the high performing environments that we were talking about before. So it's really an approach, and it's something that when we talk about our intentional leadership programs or our intentional leadership coaching, is how do you go from being someone who is potentially in a reactive space, who is just acting out of your natural style, to getting the results that you want through knowing the strategies of how to get them. And that's where the coaching comes in, and giving people the ability to develop themselves. So if I think of like some of the people that I've been coaching now for like 2 years plus, and we work on their kind of intentional leadership development, we will look at challenges that they may be going through and how to take the most possible intentional approach to get the best possible results. And you may not always achieve those results, but at least you have a much higher chance of doing it because you are taking this intentional approach. That's the way I would define it. Using the 8 essentials, using the e-colors, using personal intervention, but a real kind of a development approach to how we lead people and how we lead ourselves.
And ultimately getting the intentional results that we want, which is happiness, health, wealth, success, not living in a stressful environment, not living in an unsafe environment, but actually, getting the intentional results. So yeah, really, really great piece of work for sure. And lastly, let's talk about AERO, David, advanced error reduction in organizations, because I know you lead quite a lot of that work alongside Fisher Improvement Technologies. You want to tell us a bit about that?
Sure. Advanced error reduction in organizations is our joint work that combines the advanced human organizational performance content, methodologies, techniques that Fisher Improvement Technologies have with our understanding of personality diversity and the management and application of those concepts. So it's really a fundamental shift in thinking and also operating for organizations. There's a lot out there now in terms of that kind of space. You can say, the old view of safety versus the new view of safety, the 5 HNOP principles that organizations ought to implement, error is normal, etc. So there are several elements that really, you could say, give the capability to organizations to really transform the way they see and manage risk. And we like to be very much focused also in not only giving the concepts and the kind of mechanisms to be successful, but also helping in the practical application of the theories and integrating into the day-to-day work. So you're ultimately helping people, integrate HNOP together with e-colors to a point that they're just doing their work, day-to-day work, and not having to think about applying a certain tool. It just becomes embedded in the way that business is done. That's the end outcome, the end objective. And that's where you see all the improvements in safety, quality, effectiveness, and productivity.
Fantastic. And one of the things that really jumped out at me when you said, error is normal, the next line for me is blame fixes nothing. And we know very much that certain cultures in companies, that there can be blame cultures, and that then immediately gets rid of psychological safety because people don't speak up,
It's fascinating how embedded that is, because even with companies that understand HOP, say they've been applying HOP, and then and again, it's back to our human nature. It's also traditional accountability and HR and just the way we actually create organizations. They are geared towards fixing the problem in the quickest way possible, which oftentimes is just to say, it was this person's fault, and let's get rid of him. Or even for smaller businesses, let's not even go into high risk. Yeah. What do you think happens if you have a coffee shop with 3 people and somebody messes up? Do you want to look at really understanding the systemic drivers that cause the individual to get there? Or do you just fire them and get somebody else? I mean, it's pretty terrible, but it's the way that unfortunately oftentimes our tendencies or our minds are geared towards that. So understanding that and actually applying it is absolutely key.
And in addition to that, the personal responsibility on that person. So, when I read my initial e-colors report that said you may well jump in to help someone else without thinking, and that could get you seriously hurt or possibly even killed if you're working in an oil and gas platform. Well, that was like, oh, okay. So I've got personal responsibility here, and I've got tendencies that I need to manage. And it's inexpensive. You can go and find out your e-colors for free. You can upgrade to a premium report for as little as $50. I mean, it's not expensive to find out a bit about yourself and the work that has been done by yourselves and the rest of the team. Take it on yourself to go and discover that. It's great if your company will help you with that, but take it on yourself to at least make the start and make the first move. And then all the things we've just covered in the last 10, 15 minutes, they all lead on, don't they? And a really high performing company will adopt all of these via a process in order to bring out the best in their people, from the frontline workers right away to the chairman and CEO, etc. So yeah, it's a great piece of work, and I'm very grateful that I can be this involved with you both and everything that we're doing. So how do you see the future of the company? What's your goals? Laura, do you want to go first?
Sure, I can. I think, to me, if we have the opportunity to continue to make a difference, create better work environments, and create more intentional experiences for people where they can realize their potential and help to realize the potential of others, then we are on track. And that's something that I want to be a part of. Obviously, Mark, I think having you be a part of the team and how things are growing and going now, it's a very exciting time, and certainly looking forward to the future. And I do hope that as we focus more on our kind of Europe operations, you could say, really looking forward to making a difference in the UK. And I know that I was speaking with a leader yesterday, and they were saying how the UK and the companies there are really looking for ways to help people grow and to help business to grow. And I think that we are certainly looking forward to being a part of that, and to continuing to work with people who want to make a difference.
And I am certainly finding I'm finding it easier and easier to have these conversations in the UK, where you guys started this work US and globally. There's certain companies have done some work in the UK, but we're bringing Equilibria and e-colors front and center in the UK. And I'm finding it easier and easier to have these conversations. Companies are more and more open to, I want to keep our people safe, but I want them to grow. I want a better team, more production, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, absolutely. And I'm Lewis and Paul and the rest of the team, including yourselves, have done some amazing work over the last 20 years. Equilibria celebrated 20 years this year. We've got 20 more years or probably 50 more years to really, continue to make a difference, which is really important. So thank you, Laura. David, how do you see the future of things?
Just as Laura mentioned, I think I also want to play a particular role in continuing to build our practitioner network. It's very fulfilling work to be able to work with professionals from all over the world that choose this tool as their reference to the clients that they influence. I played a big part of that in developing the program and working with people and getting them ready. And it just really amazes me how much we have a method, a system of delivery and helping people get that initial experience and exposure. But when you start collaborating with professionals all over the world, there's just so many more and interesting ways to do that type of work. And I just find that incredible. And I have a few people in mind that are just doing an amazing job with that while continuously fully kind of, embracing the ethics and the tool itself, but oftentimes doing things in their own way, which we kind of appreciate.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I need variety in my life as a top color yellow, it's part of, and I find that with coaching, with my life remix coaching and eColors work, I just find that variety. There's never a dull moment from hour by hour, working with different people in different industries, doing different things. It's just such a great way to spend my waking hours. Really grateful to be a part of it. And I think there's a lot for us to achieve and to take forward. And on that note, we're almost out of time. We're almost finished. But I think we should have a special nod to your dad and to Lewis, obviously, for bringing this to the world with the other business partners, and also recently receiving quite a special testimonial video from the vice chair of one of the world's largest global energy companies in Chevron. Mark Nelson sent a wonderful 1-minute video, didn't he, thanking Lewis and the entire team for the intentional leadership piece and the difference that the company Equilibria had made in Chevron and indeed throughout the subcontractor network, if you like, the supplier network. Any thoughts on that, David? And we must have been quite pleased to see that when it arrived.
I'm just very thankful. We've had a really great ongoing relationship, and we've helped in many different ways, and getting that kind of recognition, it certainly means a lot. Yeah,
absolutely. What did you think, Laura, when you saw that?
I mean, it means a lot because I really respect Mark as a leader, very, very much so. And, one of the experiences we had with him early on, and he's probably one of the only people that we've worked with that has ever told us this, but he expected us to push the boundaries. And he actually said something that has stuck with me for a long time. And he said, I expect you to fail at least 50% of the time.
Interesting.
I was like, what?
Well, yeah. Hang on, I'm a consultant. How does that work?
No, but I think what I understand now and what he meant by that is, if we're not failing, or if we're not, not getting things 100% right the first time, you're not pushing hard enough. You're not, really kind of trying to do new things, innovate, bring different ways of doing things to people, also getting yourself out of your comfort zone and helping other people to get out of their comfort zone. So it means a lot coming from him because, like I said, I really, really do respect him as a leader.
Absolutely. I've got a great little book. I might be able to find it here. There's a great little book here called U Squared. Which is an amazing little book. It's only tiny, look, it's really thin. But you just said something that really just got me to think there. Now I need to find it. There's essentially a chapter here that says seek failure. And now I won't be able to find it. There it is. Seek failure. There you go. And it's part of being a high performer is actually to seek failure and understand that it's part of the learning process, and it's not a bad thing. And to come from a man in his position achieving what he's been doing in the last 20, 30 years at Chevron. I was really pleased to see it, as you can imagine, as the business development director, to get that testimonial. Was wonderful. So yeah, really grateful. And let's be clear, on the Equilibria YouTube channel, there are, I don't know, I want to say hundreds. There's a lot, isn't there? There's a lot of testimonials that have come in, and they're all there on the YouTube channel from people globally that this information has impacted upon. And yeah, I would suggest that anyone, watching this video goes a bit further into the Equilibria channel and actually looks for those testimonials and finds people that they resonate with. Perhaps look for people that have the same e-colors, and then perhaps look for people that have different e-colors to hear those different perspectives. But yeah, it's a wonderful body of work, and yeah, I think that there's a lot for us to do, and a lot for us to achieve together. And yeah, I think that it's well within our scope for the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years. So is there anything else you'd like to say just before we sort of finish up? David, do you want to share anything before we leave? Are you happy with how it's gone this evening?
No, I think very happy. Thank you for the time, for making it so easy and comfortable to be a part of this, and looking forward for more in the future.
Well, first of all, as a top colour yellow, that's my job, right? So it's all part of the process. And Laura, how do you feel it's gone this evening? Are you happy?
Great. Really lovely conversation. And, for me, it's great when you get to work with people whom you like and who you can make a difference with. And honestly, great conversations. So thank you very much for creating the space, for the great questions, for the inquisitive mind, the curiosity. And I really hope that people get something out of it.
Absolutely. Well, 100% they will. I enjoy listening to you both, right? So, and I've known you for quite some time, so I enjoy listening to your take on everything. And I will end this interview by just saying, people, we are just warming up. So watch this space. Make sure you go to equilibria.com in order to find out your personality diversity, and start to look around at some of the other tools we've got, observation tools where you can, if you know your e-colors, you can start to look for indicators in other people. The Equilibria shop, if you want to become a practitioner. I mean, wow, there's a whole world of potential. And if you're genuinely interested, as I was 10 years ago when I first discovered it, if you're genuinely interested, who knows, you might be sitting here with us, in the coming years, telling us about what you've done, because there's some amazing clients that we are building in the UK and indeed globally that I think that you're all going to want to be a part of. Let's put it that way. So I shall round it up. I shall say to Laura and to David, thank you both so much for this evening. I'm looking forward to sharing this with as many people as possible. And I think, people are really going to be fascinated. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Mark.